So Thomas Merton said, when you see God in everyone, then they see God in you. And so the essence of a spiritual awakening is to discover that you are divine. But it doesn't end there. In fact, that's just the beginning. And so when you discover your true self as being one with God, if there isn't a transformation that happens from the inside out, where you can then start to see that same divine essence in everyone and in everything, then what happens is a spiritual egoism starts to arise within you. And even though you've had the awakening, even though you had the mystical experience and you know that you are divine, no one else can see it and no one else recognizes it because there's so much egoism and pride that is coming from your life because you think that you are superior and separate and better than other people because you've discovered the divine nature and you think that other people haven't. And again, that's the spiritual egoism, and we see it all the time. But the key is this: the key is a true awakening does not end, does not stop with you discovering that you are divine. It has to go beyond that, because in discovering that you are divine, you realize that the divine, that God, that consciousness, whatever you want to call it, is infinite and within all things. They're infinite, meaning there is no limit or boundary to it. You can't say it's just this or it's just that. It's everything and nothing. And so it's this awareness, it's this recognition that God or consciousness is fundamental in the sense of everything that's arising, all the matter and all the forces of the universe are coming from or are arising from pure consciousness, because that is what awakening is all about. It's realizing that you fundamentally are pure consciousness. You are beyond the body, beyond the mind, beyond thoughts, beyond feelings, beyond the ego, beyond time, and beyond space. You are what's aware of it all. You are pure consciousness, pure being, pure awareness, God, the divine, whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter, because it's ineffable. It's beyond all words and thoughts and conceptualization of the finite mind. So it doesn't matter what name you give it, but ultimately you are beyond all of it. And so in recognizing that and experiencing that, you can't just stop with yourself, because that is the ego. The ego wants to be separate and superior. But when you have that true encounter and you continue to go with that, you continue to allow the divine in you to rise and shine, then it illuminates the world around you, and you start to see that same divine essence in every single person that you meet. And it truly is a beautiful thing. And that's really the whole point. That's the whole game of this matrix that we're living in. That's the whole point of life here on earth, is to discover God hiding in every single human being. And I know that can be difficult and challenging at times. Why? Because the ego and different thoughts and actions that people partake in can be something that definitely hinders us from seeing God in them, right? But here's the thing that we have to realize. Like, if we've had an awakening experience, we know that we are not our actions. We are not what we do, and we are not what we don't do. We are not the ego. We are not our behavior. And so if we can recognize that for ourselves, that we can know that for ourselves, that we are what's beyond all that. We are what's aware of our thoughts. We have thoughts, but we are not our thoughts. Actions happen through our lives, but we are not our actions. If we can see that in ourselves, if we can know that we are what's aware of all the thoughts and emotions and feelings and actions that are coming from our lives, then we should be able to start seeing that in other people. And what we can know, what we can understand, is that when someone is behaving or acting in a way that's contrary to the divine within them, then it's because they're unaware of the divine within them. Because if they were aware of the divine within them, if they knew who they really were, then they wouldn't be behaving the way that they were behaving, or saying what they were saying, or doing what they were doing. And I think that's why when Jesus was being crucified, he prayed to the Father and he said, Father, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. In other words, they were unconscious in that moment of what they were doing because they didn't really know who they were. If they knew who they were, then their actions would look completely different. And that's the whole thing. I think I've talked about this before too in other videos. Maybe I haven't. But anyways, the difference between being and doing. So when you are living from your true self, when you understand who you really are, then you start living from being. And when you start living from being, then the good works, the acts of service, the compassion, the kindness, the unconditional love, the mercy, the forgiveness, all those things start to flow naturally and effortlessly from our lives. We don't have to try to be good. Goodness is just a byproduct of who we are, therefore it flows naturally. But if we're living from doing, then that's when we get into performance and religious acts, and we're trying to do in order to be. We're trying to attain some kind of spiritual status. And then we get into fruit inspection instead of understanding that beyond the fruit there's a root. And so we have to shift the root. If we shift the root, then there will be different fruit that is produced, not the other way around. And that's why it's so important for us to know that. We can start to see that for our own selves, but we have to go beyond that. We have to see it in other people. We have to know that if that person awakens to who they really are, if they recognize the divine within them, then there will be a transformation in their lives, and the fruit of their lives will start to reflect that of the divine being. And I'll say this too, there is only one being. There is not separate beings. That's something that the ego is creating. That's the egoic illusion. But the reality of it is that there is one being, and we all share in that being. We all live and move and have our being in one being, God's being. So there's one being, and it's the same thing as saying that there's one consciousness or there's one spirit. Everything is one. Everything is interconnected. It's just like, think of it as all the waves of the ocean are the ocean, right? So we are the waves of the ocean. And there's different manifestations, and each wave is a little bit different, but it's all connected to the same ocean. Same thing with all the branches of a tree, right? All the different branches are the tree. And so in the same way, there is no separation between us and other people. We are all one. The consciousness, the being that we all share in, is fundamentally one. And that is who we really are, and that fundamentally is God. And everything is arising from God, or pure consciousness, or again, whatever you want to call it. But if we can see past all the things that prevent us from the foundation, from the root, from the ground of all being, which is God, and all those things are like the ego and all these different actions and thoughts and behaviors and all the things that are preventing us from seeing the light shining beyond all that, then we can start to profoundly see ourselves and others in a different way. Because then we go from separation consciousness to unity consciousness. And I think that's what Jesus was talking about when he would say things like, you know, what you do to the least of these, you were doing to me. What does he mean by that? Well, think about it like this. Jesus was living from his true self. He was living from the divine in him. So he wasn't speaking from being a separate ego or, you know, a separate personal self. He was speaking, it was the Father in him, it was God in him, it was source consciousness in him that was saying everything he said and doing everything he did, and he even says that in John 14. And so in Jesus telling his audience that whatever they are doing to the least of these, they are doing to him, essentially what he is saying is he is trying to get them to realize, to recognize that it is God in those people that they are treating, that they are serving or communicating with, interacting with. And if we can understand that, if we can start to see that every person we meet is actually God in disguise, God hiding, then I think that will tremendously change how we treat one another. And I think it's why Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, with the recognition that your neighbor is yourself. There is no separation. Again, everything is arising from this infinite sea of consciousness. And God is hiding in everyone and also in everything. So even beyond human beings, we look at the earth, and we're not separate from the earth. We are the earth, right? And so it really does impact every aspect of our lives and how we treat everything around us, everything and everyone around us. And I know it can be challenging, I know it can be difficult, but I think that's what the game is all about. That's what this matrix is all about. It's about seeing past the illusions, past the Maya, and understanding that that God, the one, has divided into the many in order to know itself better. And in that dividing, there's this sense of separation, there's this illusion of separation, but all it is an illusion. And the game is seeing past that. The game is awakening to what is. And so when you start to see God in every single person, when you truly experience that and you're living from that state of being, then what happens is people start to see God in you, just like Thomas Merton said. But people won't really see God in you until you see God in them. And that's something I think that's profound to really ponder. I think about when Jesus says, if your eye is single, then your body will be full of light. And so in essence, what he's saying is that if you can see with unity consciousness, if you can see that God in you is God in everyone and everything hiding, then just by that recognition, just by that seeing, then your body will be full of light. Your body or your being will reflect that. Therefore, this good fruit will be a byproduct of your life, and that's what people are going to see. So that's the sequence of it. You see God in yourself, you wake up to the divine essence that you are, and then you see that same divine essence in everyone. And when you see that same divine essence in everyone, then they see it in you, because there is a light. The light of who you are is shining because of this enlightenment that you are experiencing. And enlightenment has nothing to do with attaining or achieving or earning something. It has everything to do with simply realizing what is, recognizing the truth of reality. And it's a truth that has always been true, that has always been within you, but there has been something that is preventing you from seeing it, from experiencing it, and that is the ego, that is the false self, that is all these different feelings and thoughts and emotions that come from the illusion of separation. But ultimately, what we have been searching for, what we have been seeking, is the essence of our being. And that's why Rumi said, you are what you seek. And so again, enlightenment is simply realizing, it's awakening to what is. It has nothing to do with some kind of spiritual status that has to be earned or gained. You already have it. It's who you fundamentally are. That is enlightenment. And true enlightenment, again, goes beyond this awareness of yourself, of your true self, because when you are truly experiencing enlightenment, then the light of your being will shine, because you are seeing each person as God in disguise. You were seeing God in them, and when you truly see God in them, then they truly see God in you. So, if you found this video helpful, informative, or insightful, please leave a thumbs up at the bottom of the screen and be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.